as I was working, as I finished baseball, which was first broadcast in 1994, I began work and was finishing unexpectedly, having more to do with the West. I had set in motion these biographies, these 5 biographies. At the same time, I set in motion what I thought was the completion of a trilogy that I was working on. If Civil War was the beginning and baseball was the sequel, then jazz was the third thing. In fact, the baseball series began with a quote from the African-American scholar Gerald Early, who says that when they study our American civilization 2,000 years from now, and that's an awfully long time, Americans will be known for only 3 things: the Constitution, baseball, and jazz music. Now, the Constitution's greatest test was in the Civil War. We covered it in many other places, in the Congress and films that we would come on. We'd done baseball, and now we were turning our attention to jazz. In fact, in order to bring alive the central important episodes of jazz, the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, the music that had made those scenes come alive was jazz music, and I didn't know enough about it. And so I needed to know about the only art form we've completed, to continue the story of race, to talk about the essence of who we are. And so we worked on what was the most satisfying, the most difficult, and I thought the best film we had done in jazz that came out in early 2001. And it took 6 years of work to get it done, and incredibly difficult and challenging and satisfying. For the first time, music wasn't just background. It was background, and it was middle ground, and it was foreground, and a kind of hyperground as we at times deconstructed pieces of music. And it had a kind of joyous propulsion, and at the same time was wrestling with the same things that had been elemental in baseball, and then before that in the Civil War, the question of race and all of that. You know, it's hard to talk about Louis Armstrong without crying. I mean, I went in, I thought he was like most people. I thought he was this guy with this big smile and a white handkerchief and, a singer of Hello Dolly, popular. And then all of a sudden you learn his history and you realize that he is the most important person in the history of jazz. He transformed it from an ensemble music to a soloist art. He created, for the lack of a better word, modern time, what we call swing. In the early days of swing music, big band swing, they didn't call it. They called it orchestrated Armstrong. When Duke Ellington, our greatest composer, heard Armstrong, he said, I want him on every instrument. And in a way, he sought out musicians that at each position would do what Armstrong had initially centered it. He then not only transformed jazz, he then transformed singing. I mean, all of singing. Everybody sang on the notes. He sang before or after them. He bent them. He did it with a heart so capacious that our joke was that if we lived good lives, we'd get a chance to hear Armstrong blow Gabriel out of the clouds. He is to music, and I did not say jazz, what Einstein is to physics, what Freud is to medicine, and what the Wright brothers are to travel. We are talking about a quantum leap and contribution in our understanding of music, and it is in the body and soul of a person who comes off misunderstood. I mean, by the time a nascent militant black movement was started, he looked like an Uncle Tom, where he had been the first and only performer to go up against some of the pernicious evidence of segregation, Orville Faubus, when they were trying to desegregate Central High School in the late 50s. Armstrong spoke out where others were silent. I mean, he's just an amazing, amazing figure in American history, and I was privileged. That's the only word I can think of, privileged, to have the opportunity to celebrate his extraordinary life. Well, 2 interviews for me stick out, and that was with Gary Giddens, the critic, longtime jazz critic for the Village Voice, incredibly intelligent human being who we went to again and again and again over the years of the production. I think we did 4 different interviews with him as we got smarter, always forcing him to keep that old shirt, don't throw it away, so that they would be the same thing. And then Wynton Marsalis, the great jazz trumpeter, pedagogue extraordinaire, who has helped to make jazz, help keep jazz alive now. I mean, he's just an amazing human being with a great profession. And it began not only did he give us an extraordinary contribution to our film, but he initiated a professional relationship that we still enjoy. He's composed music for me for a couple of other films, and a friendship that I value as much as anything.